Hey, welcome. So I just wanted to talk about Dexter today. I absolutely loved Dexter when it was on. It was one of my favorite shows, the original one, not Original Sin, the original one. And I thought it was so well done doing the point of view of a character with a secret. That was one of my favorite things that was so well done. I feel like a lot of point of views where you hear someone's internal dialogue. I've originally watched Dexter when I was younger, so it was an introduction to the idea of writing from a point of view. At least the one that stood out the most to me. I think a lot of children's shows and a lot of shows in general don't speak from one character's point of view. And also, I do believe that it's something that is very common in literature, especially right now. A lot of books are first person point of view. And I think that it makes sense in a book and I see why it's so common, but I think that it was so well done in Dexter. And I wanted to talk about the different series, like the Dexter universe. And something that I think is profound that wasn't really captured in the original show was the father and son dynamic. Always felt like Dexter revered his father, but I also felt like there was this kind of like Frankenstein, like father doesn't love the creation. And I felt that there was something that was taken away in the original series from their relationship that I think in definitely Original Sin it was brought back. You saw the tension of between Dexter and his dark passenger and his father's relationship to that, but also I felt like it showed a profound bond that they had and it went deeper into it. If there's one thing I would change about Dexter Original Sin, it would be to make it seem, I think it was set in the 90s, but it wasn't really like a 90s period piece. I think it would have been super fun if it was, kind of like Stranger Things, where it really like takes takes place in an era that makes you want to bring that back. And I do understand that it's the Dexter universe, so maybe they downplayed it and focused more on, I feel like they do bring the Miami aspect to a lot of it. And then in the one from New York, it was very New York centric, and I loved it because I used to live in Lincoln Center. So Dexter Resurrection, I think that actually is my favorite. Original Sin was really well done, but there's something about New York that I just love in Dexter Resurrection, and I felt like there was something so epic about it. He wasn't doing it alone, and there were so many other people, and also it made it more pronounced, him and other serial killers, like the difference between them and the idea of the code. And this is why I started off talking about the father son dynamic, because I feel like at its heart the show really talks about a father and son dynamic. And if I had to compare it to another horror um, film that does this well, it would be The Exorcist with the mother and daughter relationship. And the idea of even seeing God in a feminine sense and having a relationship with God or the divine, like almost like a mother would with her daughter, and this idea of unconditional love that in The Exorcist the mother offers Reagan. And yeah, I really think that this show and the universe as a whole, I think it has a commentary about fathers and sons and their bond. I think it also emphasizes the dynamic of tension between siblings, and specifically that there's something between siblings that isn't exactly the same as between a father and son. And I find this interesting because it always seems like Deb is a liability and that her finding out is a liability. And also, like, when everything came out in the original Dexter, it seemed like it was a collapsing energy and that it was the destruction of something rather than rather than the truth between Dexter and his father being this kind of building and bonding, and it actually shapes the code. Um, and again, I don't want this to be necessarily a commentary about fathers and sons, but that's why I'm bringing up that I talked about this with The Exorcist and that it's a story about a mother and a daughter and unconditional love, and it mirrors a relationship that one would have with God. And I loved the scenery in Dexter Resurrection. I felt like it opened up into a world, and that's something that I really loved. I am disappointed that if they bring it back again, that Dexter Resurrection is gonna be a capsule in time and that it's not opening up to that world. But also, as a writer myself, I can create a world and live in that world. So that's something that I really actually loved, the idea of this kind of, like, high culture, but also low morality, and I think that it is definitely a trope, but it is in a way it was done so well, and yeah, I think that's a world worth exploring. I absolutely love the Dexter universe. I would love to write something specifically main character point of view, internal dialogue, um, maybe like shorts for the channel, maybe not like a whole series, but I am working on original series for the channel, and that is something I'm super excited about. I did an introduction to the Pink Witch, which is gonna be a character, and actually the Pink Witch isn't even the, like, main character or what the series is named after. So I can't wait to share that. It will probably be coming at the end of December. I'm just gonna take a drink of water. Um, I'm a little dehydrated today, so I'm having some liquid IV. I really need it. I don't know if anyone else watched the Dexter series. I'm curious which one is your favorite. I would love to hear in the comments or in the chat which is your favorite. I definitely know that my favorite is Dexter Resurrection. The only thing I liked about Dexter New Blood was when his girlfriend found out that, like, who he was, and he was like, "I don't need to talk to you, I need to talk to Dexter Morgan," and I felt like that was so well done, and I actually wasn't a fan of, like, how slowly it built the entire series, but then, like, it being this slow burn to this kind of, like, really big monumental moments, like something like that, and then Dexter taking on a completely different identity, which actually is his original identity. um, I felt like that was worth it and it made the whole series better, but it probably wouldn't be one I would go back and rewatch. Maybe I would rewatch the final episodes that were more powerful. Something I did enjoy, with the Dexter New Blood was his morning routine and how the episodes would start, with that song. I actually have that song. Sometimes I run to that song because, I think about Dexter running to it, and that just is so, well done. And that one the slow burn ended up being worth it in the end because it led to these epic moments where Dexter Morgan was introduced as Dexter Morgan, and that was something that I think the show Dexter didn't have because Dexter was so much of a focal point in the show that it was almost like there weren't times that he was introduced to anyone other than like when he had someone when he was doing a kill, and he would, kind of like take the mask off. And I felt like it was well done in Dexter New Blood when he took the mask off. And I'm trying to think if there's anything that would compare to that. I think there's moments in Dexter that the original that have that, but there was something special about the reveal in New Blood and how well done it was. I again think it was a lot about the relationships between father and son, and you saw the relationship between Dexter and his father, and then Dexter and his son, and it's fascinating and well done. Something that it does is kind of like it parallels the two of them, and it parallels one generation to the next in a very unique way. And I love how strict the code is. I think that that is so well done, and that the violation of the code has consequences. Something I'm learning right now in my own life, this is has nothing to do with horror, but the idea of boundaries, and that boundaries have consequences, and that you have to let people feel the consequences of violating a boundary, and that the best thing you can do for them is allow for them to feel the consequences of violating a boundary. And an example in the book, I think it was Boundaries, Townsend and Cloud, I think were the authors. And it actually went through like these biblical explanations and examples, and also some like random examples. Um, and it was really cool. But something that was an example was when this woman, she said her husband wasn't coming home on time, and there wasn't like necessarily a consequence for that. So she was like, she just didn't put the food out because it was like, we ate already, so you're gonna have to get something else. And then he started calling to say when he was going to be late so that there would be food for him. And that's like a very small example. Another example is like in a relationship, if someone like violates a boundary or doesn't treat you right, that you have to, sometimes limit access, and for two reasons. One, because it actually allows for you to protect yourself, and two, because the other person has to understand like that there's a consequence so that they can actually feel what it feels like to not have you there. Um, and something that I don't think in terms of like relationships, I think if you have to show someone your absence for them to appreciate you, if you go back to them, they won't appreciate you, and it'll just be cycles of that. So I think once that happens, a relationship is really over, at least in my experience. Also, I feel like I show up for people in relationships. So for me to feel like someone has violated a boundary, it's usually not warranted in the way that it would be like, okay, like give and take. It's more kind of like taking rather than an equal reciprocated exchange. But yeah, I do think the idea of someone violating a boundary is a reason for them to lose access to you. Um, and when I think back to how this relates to things like Dexter, it's obviously there are a lot of consequences for people who violate Dexter's code. And I think that it can be hard for us in our lives to see these kind of like black and white situations as black and white. And I think a lot of us have all these gray areas. And also, I see people are here. If you want to say hi in the chat, please say hi. There's all these gray areas. And I think that so many of us live in these gray areas and we are afraid to ask for what we want and we are afraid to make things black and white. And this isn't everyone because there are people who will demonize other people and never take a look at themselves. So that's not saying it's everyone, but I think for most people who are somewhat regulated or have some sort of look toward healing or commitment to healing, um, there's this gray area where you're not always sure that you should put consequences to someone violating a boundary or someone overstepping or crossing a line. And I think when we watch shows like this, and even the horror genre in general, we are so glad that there are consequences for bad behavior. And if you look at like the classics, like Halloween and even Nightmare on Elm Street, like and they poke fun at this in a meta way for Scream, the original Scream, and then the other screams where Randy talks about this, the rules of horror movies. And I think something that is so therapeutic about horror films is that a lot of the times the people who are targeted, and I'm not talking about final girls, but the people who are targeted are people and actually like pass on are people who violate some sort of boundary. And especially like if you see someone who's like completely rude, like usually that person is like the first one to go. And I think there's something to be said about there being real grave consequences in horror films for people who step out of line, and also for people to be rewarded for being strong, for being moral. And you see that a lot with the classic horror films. And there's a bit of a twist on it in the 90s. Chucky, like Child's Play, that's another one. Like every time you see a character that just doesn't have their head on straight, they usually are one of the first ones to go. Hey, Mario. Actually, I didn't announce when this one would be. I ended up having a little bit of free time. I was sick today. That's actually why I'm having liquid IV because I'm dehydrated from how sick I was. Um, Boundaries are very important. I like how you connect it to Dexter. Well, I mean, if you think about it, all horror films, I feel like people who like horror either are like completely like out of their minds or like are completely out of their minds because they give so much leeway in their life and they don't give anyone consequences to violating their boundaries. And in a way, it's therapeutic to see like there be a black and white and there be like actual consequences for people who aren't good people. And I think that sometimes we can have comfort horror movies because so many of the times there are consequences for different things. And I think even society as a whole, we're told that boundaries shouldn't have consequences, and I think that that is completely wrong. And I was talking about the book I read on boundaries, and it talked about all these biblical examples, and it was really powerful. I highly recommend it. The fictional characters with the code I find interesting. Yeah, so the code specifically, I think is actually what made me start thinking about the idea of boundaries. And like how strict that Dexter is with the code is something that I feel like people can find comfort in. And I think a lot of the times people who don't understand the horror genre and aren't fans of the horror genre, they don't understand that there is a bit of comfort in these things, in things being black and white and in boundaries having consequences. And I think it's rare that there are horror movies where you're like, that person that person should make it the whole time, or that person should be the first to go. And I think there's something very comforting about that. Maybe that's why we do like horror. I do find comfort in some. What's the book? Let me look up the exact name of the book. I'm gonna look on my Audible. I listened to it. Um, and let me see what else is said. Hannibal Lecter has a code too. He only eats rude people. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. And also in Silence of the Lambs, the way he interacts as helping a young detective is really powerful. So the book actually is Boundaries Updated and Expanded Edition, Henry Cloud, John Townsend. Um, yeah, like Hannibal Lecter, at least in Silence of the Lambs, is someone that you're almost rooting for. At least I think I think it's anyone would be rooting for him, but I was rooting for him, and you kind of want him to be free. But also I think there's like this kind of like chilling and terrifying feeling when he speaks. My nose is running a little bit and I don't have a tissue, so I might have to go soon. I was rooting for him. I don't tell many people that unless you're a horror fan. You don't get it. Yeah, I think that's so true. In my book, I have this saying about people who get it and people who don't get it. It's not about horror. It's just about like in life. I feel like there are people who get it in life, and I don't mean like, hack life or like are out of the matrix. I feel like people who are compassionate, people who see good and see bad and can differentiate between them, and not in the way that they polarize people and not in the way that they demonize people, just in the way that they're like, I can see good and bad and choose good. And I think it's the same in horror. Like, it's like sometimes there is a goodness that is within these characters who do horrible things. I mean, we've talked about Freddy Krueger on here, and I'd love to see Freddy Krueger um, team up with the kids rather than go after them, and turn it on the parents, like have it be the parents are the murderers and the parents had like this whole thing. And I'd love for it to be kind of like a cover up, and then a twist at the end that Freddy was just being Freddy. And um yeah, that's I absolutely love that. I don't know, I feel like I should make a video separately on that. But I'm such a fan of horror films that talk about good and evil and allow for you to feel more good in your life. That would have made a good movie, having Freddy team up with the kids. Yeah, I absolutely am obsessed with this. I I think when we first started this, the 7-hour live stream, we watched like maybe like 4 or 5 back to back, and I just kept like every time I was doing the cosplay. Actually, that's what like started it. I was doing the cosplay and I was like, this is weird. Like, it's like every time I would dress up as the killer and watch the movie, I would over identify with the killer because I would be like, oh, like I know exactly what it feels like to look like this and to have like to look down and like see your hand. Um and I had this dream, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half ago, about Freddy Krueger um just being like they didn't get it right. Like they didn't get right like that I am not bad. And that it was kind of like this person that was wrongly misrepresented, and I absolutely love that idea. And I also love the idea of like having it be a twist that it's like actually he's worse than you thought. And something I love about the franchise is we all have discussed how we love the third one, Dream Warriors the best. And I think it's because there's this kind of like ensemble cast and it's them teaming up and even having Nancy come back and be like a sage character, a wise mentor. I think that that is so powerful, and I would love to see Freddie kind of like flip the narrative on its head and be like be going after the parents, because I also talked about how, and I think this goes for a lot of parents in horror genres. I don't think the parents in most horror movies, at least the franchises, uh, are like, I think they're just as bad as the killers. I think a lot of them are detrimental to their children's well-beings, and are just toxic. And yeah, I think there's something about people being in positions of authority and not actually earning it, just being placed there. LOL, you had a meta experience that is an interesting. You were more in the character's head because you dressed as them. Yeah, I should make a short about that because it's so fascinating. I would recommend it to anyone. um, I would love to do a video just on that. I think I'll put it on my list. The parents are very absent or ignore the children's concern. Yeah, and a lot of the times they gaslight the children. They tell them that they're absolutely crazy, and then they end up being attacked, and it's like, that narrative changes quickly. But yeah, I think that there's something, especially Nightmare on Elm Street, because they actually do band together and murder Freddy. I just think there's so much there that would lead to a sinister twist. Um, but also that would be so comforting, because something I don't like about those films is that, and also it, not the first one, the second one. And I didn't read the whole book, so I'm not speaking to the book. I didn't watch Welcome to Derry yet. Um, the remake of it, of done like maybe like a decade ago. Um, I feel like the parents are so sinister in that one. Like, there's something so sinister about them. And it's the same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's so disturbing. And I do feel like in Nightmare on Elm Street, there isn't a resolve. And I would love for that to be changed. I would love for the parents to kind of like, there'd be some sort of like cathartic, like, um, ending for the parents. It is also one that lends itself to bad parents. Yeah, I need to catch up to Welcome to Derry. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. I forget what channel it's on, but I didn't subscribe to it yet. I watch things, like, on such rare occasions. I would love to get a schedule where I can actually, like, sit down and watch things. I think I was talking to you in DMs about this, that I actually watch so few films or television shows these days. Every once in a while, I'll, like, really get into one and, like, prioritize it, but in terms of, like, rhythms with, like, daily flow, I don't have like a good rhythm to be like, I watched these many movies this week. And it's the same with reading. I have been reading less, and I want to incorporate more times where I can read. Because I think it's almost like binge eating. Sometimes you binge TV shows and binge books. Um, because you don't actually have a consistent amount of time you're enjoying yourself. So you feel like you have to overindulge because you're like, when's the next time I'm going to get this? Because you're in this scarcity mindset. But that gets really deep into it. It's on Max. You did. It's easy to get on a good schedule. It's because so many options. It's hard to pick one and stay to it. Yeah, also, a lot of times at night, I will go on YouTube and watch, like, fan videos, Supernatural, Angel, Buffy, like, those are some of my favorite ones to, like, watch fan videos, and then also some things like Fault in Our Stars, I don't know, that one always gets me to cry. Um, just well done fan videos. Yeah, I figured you meant to say it's not easy. On Max, yeah, I have to look into that one. I mean, it's like so many of the streaming services are such a low price. Like, I don't like, especially if you do like monthly, they're all such a low price and affordable. But I don't know why, looking like thinking about doing a season, it's like, when am I gonna find the time? Um, but I want to change that. I do go down that rabbit hole of fan videos. They make good edits. Yeah, I don't know why, but I'll watch the same ones over and over again because they make me feel something. Also, I have like mixes on my YouTube channels that are like auto set from ones that I'll watch over and over again. And before I write, I'll go in and like get in the mood to write. There's something about, like, just, like, the snippets of, like, actually feeling something that is so powerful. Um, I don't know, I think Supernatural might be on Peacock now. I don't know if or maybe, like, the end of next week. Um, and I'd love to rewatch Supernatural. I look up at edits of those all the time. That's like a really well done sibling show. Um, which is funny because I feel like Dexter, there's like that sibling element, but also the secret builds so much tension. In Original Sin, I didn't like that. I didn't like how I felt like they were constantly competing with each other. Although Deb has this kind of like competitive nature even in the original Dexter. Some of those fan ones are comforting, and they usually do pick great music to it. Yeah, it's so well done. I went to a Supernatural convention maybe 10 years ago. It's been a while. I do need a Supernatural rewatch. When I went to the Supernatural convention, I was sitting there and I was just like, this is like a moment where something I love is like to go on YouTube and watch these videos. And I was sitting there in a room full of people and there was like a contest for who made the best video. And I was like, this is like my dream come true. I'm like in a room with like filled with other people who love to do exactly what I love to do. And it was a really like I felt seen kind of moment. I also got this like Linda Blair Exorcist poster that was signed by Linda Blair, and I can't find where I put it. I know I must have hid it because it was absolutely terrifying. It was so terrifying, but it was just the best. I would every Halloween, I would like put it in the bed and I would like put a hoodie on it and like make it look like that was like the face. And then I would like chain it up, like in the movie The Exorcist. And that was like my favorite decoration. Thank you everyone for coming. I'm gonna head out. I'm feeling a little bit better, but I probably should rest. Thank you so much. Please comment. My hair is wild. Please comment, about whatever you loved in Dexter or even some of these ideas. I'll do a video. I'm on my laptop that has the worst camera ever, so I do have to get a better camera. What a cool moment that you saw that at the Supernatural convention. I need to go more, and what a cool poster you got. I'm sorry, it's misplaced. It has to be somewhere. Thank you for coming. Uh Yeah, I have shorts that are gonna be coming out this week that are gonna speak to kind of like the comfort nature of cozy horror. Thank you. Have a good one.